To make this bracelet, we've got some beads. We have 27 ultramarine blue beads here, and these are 6 millimeters in size. And then we've got 10 copper nugget beads. These are darling little 2 millimeter beads. For findings, we have copper findings to match our nugget beads. We have a magnet clasp, we have clamshell bead tips, and we have 2 crimp beads. And then we're going to use bead stringing wire for this project. You can use copper colored bead stringing wire. We're using gold because it isn't going to show, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. And we've got 19 strand bead stringing wire. For tools, we're going to use wire cutters and chain nose pliers. To make the bracelet, the first thing you want to do is cut a piece of bead stringing wire 8.5 inches long. And then we'll put the clasp on one end. And to do that, we're going to feed on a clamshell bead tip. So the clamshell bead tip is a little clam with a little hole in the bottom. And we're going to feed the wire up through the clam, through the hole in the clam. We're just going to let that sit there. And then we're going to feed on a crimp bead. And a crimp bead is a little piece of metal that's meant to be crimped. I'm going to feed that on. Next, what we want to do is crush the crimp bead or crimp the crimp bead onto the end of the wire. So to do that, I'm grasping the crimp bead. I don't need it to be inside the clamshell yet. I'm going to come out here so you can see it. I'm going to press that crimp bead closed onto the wire. And I'm going to give it a couple squeezes. I want to make sure it's really on there, so I can kind of tug at it. Yeah, it's on there real good. So next what you want to do is slide the clamshell up over that crimp bead. It's going to hide that crimp bead. And we're just going to close the clamshell by pressing it gently. You don't want to press too hard. It's metal and it's hollow and you don't want to dent it. Let me just give it a little squeeze like that. And that's one end, but this little wire is sticking out. I'm going to trim that wire with the wire cutters. I'm just going to give it a little snip. Just snip that right off and make sure that the clamshell is closed like that. And then we can go ahead and put one side of the clasp onto that clamshell. And to do that, I'm going to separate the magnet clasp. We love magnet clasp. You do all this work, you don't want your bracelet to fall off. So I'm just going to slide the magnet clasp into that open loop on the clamshell. And then I'm going to close that little loop up. You can buy these clamshell bead tips with a closed loop here if you're worried that it's going to open up on you. We have never had that happen, but it could happen. So you can buy it with a closed loop. You'll just want to add a jump ring in there to attach the magnet clasp. So that's on there, nice and secure. One end of the bracelet is done, and now we can do the beads. And this is a basic bead stringing project, which means we're just going to slide on the beads in the order we want them on the bracelet. And the pattern of this bracelet is going to be 1 copper nugget, and then 3 of these pretty ultramarine round beads. You could do this with any beads you want. The round beads look particularly good on this bracelet. And the copper nuggets, we like how they're smaller than the round beads. They just look nice together. So once we have on 1 nugget and 3 round beads, we're going to feed on another nugget. So here goes a nugget bead, followed by 3 of my ultramarine beads. 1, 2, 3. This is a great project to make as a gift because it's super wearable. And this blue color, we liked it because it's got kind of a denim feeling. So it really has sort of a neutral look, but it's still bright enough to be kind of jazzy. So I've got 2 beads on there. I need another one. Keep the pattern going. And this one, with these 6 millimeter beads and the 2 millimeter copper nuggets, we wound up with a bracelet that has a finished length of 7.5 inches, and that's pretty standard. But if you want it shorter, you could leave off a couple beads, and if you want it longer, you could cut your wire a little bit longer and add another set of beads. And I've got 2 more of my blue beads. The hardest part is finding the hole in the bead, right? And then here's my last nugget. So the next thing we want to do is finish the end, and to do that we're going to slide on our clamshell bead tip, and then slide on our crimp bead. They're small so that they can fit inside the clamshell. When I did the other side, I did the crimp bead all the way out at the end of the wire. But for this side, I want the beads on here nice and tight. I want them all pushed up against each other. Not so tight that it is curling in on itself, but I don't want a lot of gaps like this gappiness. So I'm going to push that together, and then I'm going to reach inside with my chain nose pliers and press that crimp bead closed inside the clamshell. And I want to tug on a little bit, make sure it's closed. It is. And then I can close that clamshell over the crimp bead. If you want, you can put a drop of jeweler's glue inside here as a little added security. But we really don't have any trouble with these coming apart. But it is nice when you're giving it as a gift to feel secure. Now I'm going to trim the wire. I'm guessing this wire was bigger than 8.5 inches because I have a lot of wire left over. But you should be able to do it with just 8.5 inches. I'm going to trim that little end, and then now I can finish this by putting my other side of my magnet clasp into that clamshell loop, and then closing the clamshell loop. I'm just kind of bending it down towards the clamshell, keeping that loop shape. Press it closed, make sure it's nice and closed. And then the nice thing about a magnet clasp is you just clamp them together, and there is our beautiful and very easy beaded bracelet.